On September 7, 1993, Mark Whiten entered baseball's record book with 4 home runs and 12 RBI in a single game. It was not an isolated burst from an unknown player. The switch-hitting right fielder finished that season with 25 homers and 99 RBI, backed by speed, range, and one of the strongest outfield arms in the game. At 26, Whiten appeared to be reaching his prime. Then the record changes. A rib cage injury limited him to 92 games in 1994. After that came a rapid trail of trades, releases, short contracts, and 8 different major league uniforms. By 2000, his career was over. Today, the historic game is better remembered than the player who produced it. So what happened after Mark Whiten's breakthrough, and how did a complete major league talent become reduced to one remarkable box score? September 7th, 1993, Busch Stadium. The St. Louis Cardinals and Cincinnati Reds were playing the second game of a doubleheader, the kind of late-season assignment that could disappear into the schedule without leaving much behind. Instead, Mark Whiten produced a box score that looked almost impossible. 4 home runs, 12 runs batted in one game. Whiten became only the 12th player in Major League history to hit 4 home runs in a game. The 12 RBI tied the single-game record established by Cardinals first baseman Jim Bottomley in 1924. Counting an RBI from the first game, Whiten drove in 13 runs during the doubleheader, tying another Major League record set by Nate Colbert in 1972. It was not simply the best game of Whiten's career, it was one of the greatest offensive performances baseball had ever recorded. 4 home runs placed him inside one of the sport's most exclusive groups. 12 RBI put him alongside Bottomley and, at the time, no one else. For a player in his first season with St. Louis, it should have been the moment that established a permanent identity.
And in one sense, it did. Mark Whiten became the 4-home run man, but that label also reduced him. The performance became easier to remember than the player who produced it. Over time, Whiten's name settled into record book lists, trivia questions, anniversary stories, and the occasional replay of that September night. The rest of the career became harder to see. That is the first problem with the way Whiten is remembered. The 4 home runs can look like an isolated eruption, one remarkable game delivered by an otherwise ordinary player. The evidence says something different. Whiten did not suddenly discover power against Cincinnati. He finished the 1993 season with 25 home runs and 99 RBI. He hit .253 and supplied power from both sides of the plate. In his first year with the Cardinals, he also recorded 9 outfield assists, 5th best in the National League. The historic game came from a player in the middle of his strongest Major League season. It was a peak, not an accident. That distinction matters because Whiten's career is often viewed backward from those 4 home runs. Everything before them becomes build-up. Everything afterward looks like decline. But on September 7, the direction of his career had not yet changed. He was 26 years old. He was completing the best season of his life. He was 1 RBI away from 100, and his name had just been placed beside 2 of the most extraordinary offensive records in baseball. The question was not whether Whiten belonged in the major leagues. He had already established that. The question was what this performance might become the beginning of. To answer that, the box score is not enough. The 4 home runs show what Whiten did on one night. They do not explain why he was capable of doing it. He stood 6'3" and weighed 210 pounds.
He was a switch hitter with power, speed, and one of the more productive throwing arms among the right fielders of his era. The nickname followed naturally. Hard-Hittin, Mark Whiten. But even that nickname told only part of the story. Whiten was not a stationary slugger waiting for a mistake over the plate. Across 11 Major League seasons, he stole 70 bases and hit 20 triples. His value extended beyond his home run total. And in right field, the record becomes even more revealing. In 1992, while playing for Cleveland, Whiten led American League right fielders with 321 putouts. He also led them with 14 assists. He finished first among the league's right fielders in range factor per 9 innings and range factor per game. Those numbers describe an outfielder who was involved in plays. He covered ground, he recorded outs, and runners had to account for his arm. There were imperfections. Whiten committed 9 errors in right field in 1993, the highest total in the National League. His defensive game could produce both impact and mistakes. But the larger career record does not describe a liability. In 1994, he led National League right fielders with 233 putouts. His career total zone figure in right field was 45 runs above average, listed 30th historically in the supplied record. His career range factor per game and per 9 innings in right field also ranked among the strongest totals shown on the historical leaderboards. The measurements are imperfect, particularly when applied across different eras. They should not be treated as a final judgment on every play Whiten made. They do establish something important. The arm was real. The range was real. The defensive contribution was real. So was the power. During the 1993 season, Whiten hit a reported 464-foot home run into the upper deck at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh.
According to the record, he became the first visiting player to reach the right field overhang. That kind of distance helped create his reputation. But his offensive profile was not built only on spectacular home runs. Over his career, Whiten collected 804 hits, including 129 doubles and 20 triples. He drove in 423 runs and scored 465. Those are not superstar totals. They are also not the numbers of a player who appeared from nowhere, had one extraordinary night, and disappeared. At his best, Whiten could influence a game in several ways. He could hit for power from either side of the plate. He could run. He could take away hits in the outfield. He could stop a runner with his arm or throw one out for testing it. That combination creates another question. How does a player with that physical profile, entering his prime and coming off a record-setting season, become disconnected from the larger memory of the era? Part of the answer is that Whiten never remained in one place long enough to build a permanent baseball identity. He played for 8 major league organizations. Cleveland was the only one that employed him for more than 2 seasons, and even that relationship came in 2 separate structures. But the movement came later. Before the trades, injuries, releases, and short-term contracts, there was an unusual beginning. Whiten entered organized baseball with less competitive experience than most players drafted into the professional system. He had not played competitive baseball until his senior year at Pensacola High School in Florida. That fact makes the rest of his development difficult to dismiss. Baseball is a game built on repetition. By the time many professional prospects are drafted, they have spent years facing high-level pitching, learning defensive positioning, refining footwork, and adjusting to failure over long seasons. Whiten began that process late, yet his physical ability was enough to earn him a scholarship to Pensacola State College. In January 1986, the Toronto Blue Jays selected him in the 5th round of the amateur draft. He signed that April. He was no longer catching up to high school or college competition. He had entered a professional organization that was developing players for a club approaching the strongest period in its history. Toronto had won the American League East in 1985. By the end of the decade, the Blue Jays were regular contenders, and their roster was becoming increasingly difficult to break into. Whiten still reached the majors. On July 12, 1990, at age 23, he made his debut for Toronto against the California Angels. He received 4 at-bats and did not record a hit. There was nothing historic about that first night, but the date itself was evidence of how quickly Whiten had advanced. A player who did not begin competing seriously until his final year of high school
had reached the major leagues 4 years after Toronto drafted him. The tools had carried him a long way. The finer points of the game still required time. Whiten exceeded rookie limits during the 1991 season, but Toronto was operating with immediate goals. The Blue Jays were trying to win the division, and on June 27, they made a deal for veteran knuckleballer Tom Candiotti. Whiten was part of the cost. Toronto sent him to Cleveland, along with Dennis Boucher, Glenallen Hill, and Cash. In return, the Blue Jays received Candiotti and Turner Ward. For Toronto, it was the kind of trade a contender makes. Candiotti was an established starting pitcher who could help immediately. For Whiten, it was the first major redirection of his career. He had reached the majors with an organization preparing to contend throughout the early 1990s.
Less than 1 year after his debut, he was sent to a Cleveland team that lost 105 games in 1991. It would be easy to read that transaction as a demotion in circumstance, but Cleveland offered something Toronto could not guarantee: opportunity. Whiten was 24 years old. He needed major league at-bats, defensive innings, and room to develop. Cleveland could provide them. And once he received that playing time, the outline of a complete player began to appear. Whiten hit 7 triples in 1991, placing him among the American League's top 10. That total reflected both his power into the gaps and the speed to extend extra base hits. Then came 1992, the season that established the defensive evidence. Whiten recorded 321 putouts in right field, more than any other American League player at the position. He produced 14 assists, also the best total among AL right fielders. His range factor marks led the position. These were not projections, they were major league results. Cleveland was still a developing club, and the team's record could obscure individual progress. But Whiten was no longer simply an athlete learning professional baseball. By 1992, he was functioning as a regular major league right fielder with measurable defensive impact. The contradiction was becoming clear. He had enough ability to force his way into a major league lineup. He had enough versatility to contribute even when he was not hitting home runs. Yet he was still searching for the organization and season that could bring all of it together. Cleveland would not be that place. On March 31, 1993, just before the new season, the club traded Whiten to the St. Louis Cardinals. Cleveland received pitcher Mark Clark and minor leaguer Juan Andujar. It was Whiten's second trade in less than 2 years. Toronto had moved him while trying to win immediately. Cleveland moved him after giving him the playing time that revealed what he could do. The transaction record was beginning to form a pattern, but it was not yet a story of decline. Whiten was only 26. He was healthy enough to play regularly. His arm, range, speed, and switch-hitting power were all established. What remained uncertain was whether those tools could converge into a true breakout season. In St. Louis, they did. And once they came together, Mark Whiten did something only 11 major league players before him had ever done. In St. Louis, they did. The Cardinals were not acquiring a finished star. They were acquiring a 26-year-old outfielder whose different abilities had appeared in pieces. Toronto had seen enough potential to draft and develop him. Cleveland had given him the playing time to establish his arm, speed, and defensive range. St. Louis was about to see the complete version. Whiten's first season with the Cardinals became the strongest offensive year of his career. He hit .253 with 25 home runs and 99 RBI. From both sides of the plate, he gave St. Louis the kind of power that could alter a game quickly. He also remained active in right field. His 9 outfield assists ranked 5th in the National League. This was not an empty power season from a player with only one useful skill. Whiten was contributing at the plate and in the field, and the production was arriving at exactly the age when a major leaguer was expected to enter his prime. The raw power could be difficult to measure,
until Whiten hit a ball that made the dimensions of a Major League stadium look small. At Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, he drove a reported 464-foot home run into the upper deck. According to the historical account, Whiten became the first visiting player to reach the right field overhang.
It was the kind of home run people remembered seeing even after they forgot the date. But distance alone did not make 1993 important. The season represented something more substantial. Whiten was receiving regular work, producing runs, and showing that the tools seen in Toronto and Cleveland could translate into the middle of a major league lineup. Then came September 7. The 4 home runs against Cincinnati were extraordinary, but they did not stand apart from the season. They completed its argument. Whiten was not a marginal player who happened into a favorable wind or a meaningless late inning. He was an established major leaguer in the best year of his career, facing another major league club and repeatedly doing the most difficult thing a hitter can do: 4 times. The 12 RBI were just as important. A home run total can describe individual power. 12 runs driven in describe a game being taken over. By the time the second game of the doubleheader ended, Whiten had tied major league records in home runs and RBI for a single game. With 13 RBI across the 2 games, he had also tied Nate Colbert's record for a doubleheader. For one day, nearly every opportunity became production. And when the season ended, the final numbers suggested that this could be more than one career year. Whiten had 25 homers. He had driven in 99 runs. He was still only 26. The record does not establish that baseball viewed him as a future Hall of Famer, and it would be inaccurate to impose that expectation after the fact. But it was reasonable to see a player whose best years might still be ahead of him. That is where the case changes. The next turn did not begin with a dramatic loss of ability. It began with a physical problem early in the 1994 season. Whiten pulled muscles in his ribcage. For a hitter, the ribcage is involved in nearly everything that produces force. Rotation, extension, balance, and the violent finish of a major league swing all place demands on the area. The source does not establish that this one injury permanently altered Whiten's swing or explains every later result. The record does establish the immediate consequence. He was limited to 92 games. After playing through his best season and producing 99 RBI, Whiten was suddenly unavailable for a large part of the next one. The momentum of 1993 did not carry forward uninterrupted. Even then, the defensive evidence did not disappear. In those 92 games, Whiten led National League right fielders with 233 putouts. His 11 total zone runs ranked 4th among National League outfielders. He could still affect games. He could still cover ground. But the season that might have confirmed his 1993 breakthrough became a season of interrupted availability. That distinction matters. Baseball careers rarely change direction in one clean moment. Sometimes the evidence arrives gradually. Fewer games, fewer opportunities, another uniform, another club evaluating whether the player can still become what he appeared to be 1 year earlier. For Whiten, 1994 was the dividing line. Before it, the transaction trail had moved him toward more playing time and greater production. After it, the moves came faster, and the stability became harder to recover. The Cardinals traded Whiten to Boston on April 9, 1995. St. Louis included pitcher Real Cormier in the deal and received Corey Bailey and Scott Cooper. Whiten's listed salary for 1995 was approximately $1.64 million, the highest annual figure shown in the supplied salary record. Those salary records may be incomplete, but the number still provides useful context. The industry had not dismissed him. A player does not receive that kind of salary in the mid-1990s because one memorable box score makes a good story.
Whiten was being paid for the larger body of work, the power, the arm, the defensive contribution, and the possibility that a healthy season could restore the production St. Louis had seen. But Boston did not become a stable second act. On July 24, less than 4 months after acquiring him, the Red Sox traded Whiten to Philadelphia for Dave Hollins. Another move, another league change, another club trying to determine where he fit. A player can be talented and still become difficult to place. Whiten had enough ability to remain wanted, but not enough sustained production or availability to become untouchable. That left him in a difficult category. Valuable enough to acquire, movable enough to trade. Philadelphia carried him into 1996, then released him on June 17. 1 week later, the Atlanta Braves signed him as a free agent. That quick signing showed that his major league value had not disappeared. Atlanta was a contending organization, and Whiten still offered switch-hitting power, experience, and an outfielder's arm. But again, the opportunity was temporary. On August 14, the Braves traded him to Seattle for minor leaguer Roger Blanco. In the space of roughly 14 months, Whiten had gone from Boston to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia to Atlanta, and from Atlanta to Seattle. By then, the story was no longer about whether he could repeat 4 home runs in a game. No player could reasonably be measured against that. The question was whether he could remain anywhere long enough to rebuild the ordinary structure of a career, a defined role, regular at-bats, familiarity with a league, and the confidence of one organization over a full season. The transaction record kept answering the same way. Not for long. Seattle granted him free agency after the 1996 season. The New York Yankees signed him on January 9, 1997. The Yankees were the defending World Series champions.
For Whiten, the contract represented another place where his experience and power might matter. But New York released him on August 15. The source also states that Whiten faced sexual assault charges while playing for the Yankees in 1997. The supplied material does not provide the disposition of those charges or enough supporting context to establish their relevance to his release or career direction. Without that evidence, they cannot responsibly be presented as an explanation for what happened next. What the documented baseball record does show is that Whiten entered another period without a major league home. By the end of 1997, 6 years had passed since Toronto first traded him. In that time, he had played for Cleveland, St. Louis, Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Seattle, and New York. The repeated movement changed more than his opportunity. It changed the way he would be remembered. Baseball memory is often organized by uniform. Fans remember the players who stayed. A long tenure creates a collection of images. The same cap, the same ballpark, the same place in the batting order, the same voice calling the highlights. Whiten never received that kind of continuity. Toronto fans could remember him as a young player included in the Candioti trade. Cleveland fans could remember the athletic right fielder with the powerful arm. Cardinals fans had the historic night and the 99 RBI season. Fans in Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Seattle, and New York saw shorter versions, each one arriving after the peak and leaving before a new identity could take hold. The player remained recognizable. The career became fragmented. In May 1998, Cleveland gave him a way back. Whiten signed with the same organization that had provided his first extended major league opportunity. He was now 31, no longer the developing outfielder Toronto had traded in 1991, and no longer the 26-year-old who had overwhelmed Cincinnati in 1993. But the physical ability had not vanished completely. On July 31, 1998, Cleveland was playing the Oakland Athletics when Whiten entered the game in a role he had never filled in professional baseball. He took the mound. It was his only professional pitching inning. Whiten allowed 1 hit, walked 2 batters, and gave up 1 earned run. He also struck out the side. 3 outs,
3 strikeouts. One of them came against Miguel Tejada, who would later become the American League's most valuable player. The inning left Whiten with a career rate of 27 strikeouts per 9 innings. It was produced by only 1 inning and carried no meaningful value as a pitching projection. But as a detail in his career file, it was revealing. The right field arm that had produced 14 assists in 1992 was still capable of creating an unusual major league moment. It would be easy to treat the pitching appearance as a novelty and leave it there. But Whiten's career had become filled with moments that were easier to remember than the work surrounding them. 4 home runs in one game, a 464-foot drive at Three Rivers Stadium, 3 strikeouts in his only inning on a major league mound. Each event was remarkable. Together, they could make Whiten appear to be a collection of odd statistical accomplishments. He was more substantial than that. Whiten remained with Cleveland through 1998. He became a free agent after the season, then signed with the club again in December. After another free agent period following 1999, he returned once more in February 2000. His final major league appearance came on May 11, 2000, against Kansas City. He received 1 at-bat and did not record a hit. There was no ceremonial ending, no final home run.
No moment that announced the closing of the case. He simply played his last major league game at age 33, nearly 10 years after his debut in Toronto. Whiten later continued his playing career with the Long Island Ducks in the Atlantic League, but his major league record was complete. 11 seasons, 8 teams, 939 games. He finished with a .259 batting average, 804 hits, 105 home runs, 423 RBI, and 465 runs scored. He added 129 doubles, 20 triples, and 70 stolen bases. Those totals require perspective. They do not support a Hall of Fame case. The supplied baseball reference measurements credit Whiten with 14.1 career wins above replacement and a 14.0 Jaws score. Both are far below the listed standards for Hall of Fame right fielders. But the Hall of Fame is not the only line separating a meaningful career from a forgotten one. Whiten played parts of 11 seasons at the highest level of the sport. He hit more than 100 major league home runs. He produced value with his legs and with his throwing arm. He led right fielders in significant defensive categories in both leagues. And at his best, he was not merely useful, he was dangerous. The 1993 season remains the clearest evidence. 25 home runs, 99 RBI, 9 outfield assists, a reported 464-foot drive into territory no visiting hitter had reached. Then one September game in which every part of his power became visible at once. What happened afterward was not one clean collapse. A ribcage injury interrupted the season that followed his peak and limited him to 92 games. From there, the career became increasingly unsettled. Trades, releases, short contracts, and recurring injuries reduced his chances to establish continuity. He never played more than 136 games in a season. That matters because availability is not separate from a baseball career. It shapes opportunity, rhythm, contract decisions, and the patience an organization is willing to extend. Whiten's talent kept opening doors. The interruptions kept those doors from remaining open. His best season occurred in his first year with St. Louis. His defining game came late that same season. He never had enough time in one uniform, or enough sustained production after the injury, to replace that image with another one. So the historic performance became both his legacy and his disguise. Baseball remembered the 4 home runs. It remembered the 12 RBI. It became less certain about everything around them. The complete record shows a late starting player who reached the majors within 4 years of being drafted. It shows a switch hitter with real power, enough speed to steal 70 bases,
and one of the strongest outfield arms of his period. It shows a player who was traded away by a contender, developed on a 105-loss team, reached his peak with a third organization, and then spent the rest of his career trying to recover stability after injury disrupted the follow-up season. That is not the record of a failed star. It is not the record of a one-game wonder. And it is not a story that needs exaggeration to carry emotional weight. At his best, Mark Whiten was a complete and imposing right fielder, capable of changing a game at the plate, on the bases, or with one throw. His career changed direction when injury interrupted his peak, and constant movement replaced continuity. He became misunderstood because one impossible night was easier to preserve than an unsettled 11-year career. But the record deserves a second look. Mark Whiten should be remembered not only because he hit 4 home runs in one game, but because that game revealed, in concentrated form, the player he had worked his way to become. For one night, baseball saw all of it. The power from both sides.
The force behind the nickname. The talent that survived a late start, multiple trades, injuries, and 8 different uniforms. The 4 home runs made Mark Whiten unforgettable. The rest of his career explains why he should never have been reduced to them.